I'm Matt Gren. I'm head of business at Scalac, and today on our session we have Radu. Radu, could you introduce yourself a bit?
Hello. So my name is Radu. I joined Scala C for 2 months now. I'm a Scala developer there. And yeah, yeah, it's good to be here.
Do you enjoy working for Scalac? You know, what is your take on that?
It has been interesting in the. I mean, all these months have been interesting, also due to the Corona context.
Yeah.
A new project, new teammates, a new working environment, everything's new. People are really nice and have helped out with transition from my previous job, so everything's going great so far.
Awesome. So Radu, today I want to talk with you about one kind of amazing thing, because we have quite an interesting observation on our blog. We see a lot of traffic coming to Keycloak topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And well, actually, it was a blog post written by someone in the past, and you know, suddenly we have so much traffic, and the whole thing for today's call is to understand this kind of situation. Of course, you know, we love to have traffic, but there is certain reason why people Google about Keycloak, right? So that's kind of the whole concept. And I invited you for this call because when you joined Scalac, you actually were one of the few ones who have the Keycloak experience. So I wanted to learn more about, from your experience, how you dealt with that solution in the past and why you think it becomes popular. You know, that kind of things would be great to hear. So my first kind of question, you know, from where you know Keycloak, so how you experience with it?
About it. Yes. So I've worked, I think 6 or 7 years ago on a project called PicketLink, which was an open source project that dealt with security. It was in the Java enterprise context. And I worked with it on a freelance gig that I had at that time. So a couple of years passed. When I then started leading the department that I previously worked at, there was, of course, some new projects coming along, and the context was in such a way that you had to think about identity management from the beginning. Reason being, the way departments were structured and how projects were flowing to my group, it kind of led to something that had to be thought of in the beginning. So when I started thinking about, okay, what solutions you want to have, is of course you write it yourself, but then it's like you invest in it. So this means developer times, bugs, things like that. You get something off the shelf, but that costs. For example, like Auth0 is like a really nice solution, but it costs. And when we started the project, it's really hard to get funding for that. And so you look at the open source landscape. So I knew PicketLink. I wanted to see where it had gone, and I saw that it evolved, or rather it had joined the suite, which is now called Keycloak. So in essence, Keycloak is an identity and access management solution. It's basically handling user information, authentication, integration with other identity providers, etc. It's open source. It's really customizable, and it became like a really important part in the ecosystem that we were building at that time.
Okay, so you know, when I was an engineer, because I was developing systems for around 7 years, you know, there were some ready modules in for instance in Microsoft frameworks, because I earlier was a Microsoft engineer. That gave you all kind of a default authorization, authentication flavors in the framework itself, right? But then you would have to using some special command line tools, generate some subset of schema for it, and you're done. So this is there, right? And there are, of course, then I switched to Ruby on Rails, and in Ruby on Rails, then you have all of these nice gems that also give you these kind of nice flashy things. And so when I look from the perspective of a business, so I can have a solution that is totally in my control, or almost in my control, and something magical which is kind of a kind of big compared to, I don't know, downloading a framework or picking up some stuff. I think the control level is much smaller, right? So when you pick such solution like Keycloak, then you are just taking the whole piece of it, and then you can't do much of digging in it. How am I right? Or
well, I mean, first of all, I mean, yes, from that aspect you are totally right, and it's probably, it offers you much more or rather it offered much more than we actually used it for. But at the same time, it was double click and it worked, also, it is an implementation of the OpenID Connect standard. So once you have your applications using the system, if they understand OpenID Connect or SAML v2 as far as a way of doing the authentication flows, then they don't need to be aware of the fact that they're actually talking to Keycloak. So because of the use of standards, then this can be hidden away. Now, of course, if you go, for example, it is a Java landscape-ish project. So at the time when we started, they had good integration with the enterprise context and good integration with the Spring framework. Also, they offered JavaScript integration. Now I think it grew. Community also started writing plugins for it. But then again, it's not something that you have to take in fully. You can, in a way, decouple yourself if you stick to using clients that are built for OpenID, for example, and not directly to Keycloak. So you can do that. So that's one thing. Now, as far as customizations go, you have the option to extend it. It is following the Java modules subsystem. So it's like they have, I think it's based on the Wildfly server application. So if you follow like OSGI patterns and things like that, so it's pretty, again, enterprise-ish, then it's fine. I mean, you can customize it. For us, we actually written 2 plugins that we needed in order to integrate with other systems within the company, and it worked. I mean, it was fine.
I get it.
Yeah.
So there are ways to extend it with your own plugins. It fulfills certain open standard, which means that actually, even if you want to get rid of it later, you just have to use something else that has the same standard. So it gives you kind of a chance to get out of it. So from that perspective, sounds good, but still, it's Java based, right? And Java is usually JVM heavy guy comes into the house. So I'm still wondering how business, is, dealing with that, so that they have to introduce new dependencies, right? So JVM is one of them, right? Maybe they are not totally touching JVM, and now they have to deal with that. So they have to deal with new dependencies. And how is with the performance? Because usually when you have in control the whole database schema and you have users in it, you can design the whole database in such way that you have control on the performance.
Yes.
I guess it's not in your database anymore. Some part of the data is in Keycloak database, right?
All part of the data is in Keycloak. Yes. So here so Keycloak in itself is a standalone application. So for us, again, it's good that if you have like a microservices architecture and you think of identity and access management handled by Keycloak, then it's fine, because you're talking with the HTTP or something like that. And so in time, as business needs progressed, we had written a wrapper around it, so to act as a so it was like a small service that added some business value that was requested, but it also added caching, so as not to overload the server. But that was added only when I think business developed in such a way to ask for these things. Other than that, you interact with like on a REST API, and so HTTP basically with it. And for us, it wasn't an issue. I think at maximum, so it was like, again, it was, so I won't say production ready, but it was a research platform for us. So I think at most there were like 1,000 users, something like that, managed by Keycloak. However, there's also an important aspect that needs to be taken into consideration is the actual database implementation, because it offers you integration out of the box. So it's like JDBC, meaning that you put MySQL, Postgres, or things like that, and also Mongo. So it has two flavors whenever you want to start it. So it really depends on how the, I guess, like what resources you also put into the database. For us, we were running on a cloud environment, actually the AWS. We had an Aurora cluster set up for it. So we had, there was a nice distinction between what means write, what means read. So with the read replicas from Aurora, and that I mean, it really wasn't an issue at all within, I guess, the whole life cycle of the project. It's actually something that we didn't even notice it was there. And I think it crashed once. I can't remember exactly what the error was, but it was like during over 3 years. So we, like, honestly, we just put it there and forgot about it. So that was like really nice.
I get it. So in the end of the day, it's a piece of software on JVM that can connect to your database using, connectors that are common. And you can work on the database level to scale it up and maintain the whole scalability. And it's not part of Keycloak at all. It's just about whether you set up these databases in the proper ways, right?
Yeah, it's about how you manage your infrastructure, I guess, in a sense. Yes.
Okay. So performance-wise, I think business is covered, so they have control on the performance.
Mm-hmm.
From the perspective of kind of vendor lock-in, it also is not the case because it fulfills certain standards. So you can just take it out and put something else that, or even write your own module that fulfills this API, and you are not vendor locked at all.
Yeah.
And how about security? Because it's an open source thing, and many companies are using it, and actually it's quite close to the outside world, right? So it's not a piece of software like, I don't know, Spark or Kafka that is in the closed and hosting environment, sending messages on local IP addresses, and have fun. But it's kind of an open source guide that you put a bit on the edge of your security, right? Because the security layer has to communicate with end clients, which are in the internet. So it means that if there is a vulnerability in Keycloak, you might have this vulnerability, right? So
yes, I guess so. But then again, I mean, the project is quite mature, so I'm thinking that your own custom solution might have much more vulnerabilities than the Keycloak has.
Yeah,
It's like something that, I mean, we started using it at Keycloak version 3, if I remember correctly, which was like 4 years ago or something like that, and now they're at version 9, so it's actively developed. And the thing is that I think so. A lot of aspects go into security. Now, I'm not an expert or anything like that in this topic, but just thinking about having to write your own stuff, and then the thing is that so you have to take care of security vulnerabilities, but you also need to take care of how you do integration, because if you work in a corporate environment, then for sure there will be other authentication solutions or identity providers that you would have to link to. So then you lose time writing those stuff. or finding plugins that you have to make work together. While this, for us, again, it worked, I guess, really good because you have LDAP integration, which is basically what you find in every enterprise, I guess. So you can defer authentication to other identity providers. So for example, I say that the whole company uses a service for authenticating. You can defer authentication to that service. So you no longer, you don't need to store passwords, for example, for users, because there's a concept of user federation that's going on. And it can be configured quite easily with it. And I guess for public projects, they are probably interested in doing social integration with Facebook and Google and Twitter and things like that. And for that, they have like designed menus for integrating with Google. So you just fill out some like client ID, secret ID, things like that, and you're done. So if you build a system in such a way that you don't need user passwords or things like that need to be stored, then you can get away with it because you can defer to other identity providers. And I guess vulnerabilities come, but I think it's more about also how you architect your entire stack, or rather your entire technical approach, on whether or not you put, so you don't open it directly to the internet. You probably have something like an API gateway in front. Maybe you can do, I don't know, we could do rate limiting in front of it, things like that. That I think are done for every public facing service, not only authentication. But then you're right, authentication is really sensitive because it's like really important. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, but I think you're right that, people tend to think that their solution is more better and, that stuff. But, well, the upside with your own solution is that no one knows the source code, right? So
yeah, true.
you
Yeah,
have
I guess
the source code, at least if it's written in any kind of decent way, to be able to sniffle around and find out where are the loopholes. And with the open source, you can spend years on analyzing all the cases, and you might find a way how to get into it. But yeah, it's kind of a theoretical discussion rather than practical, because from a practical perspective, it sounds good. I'm looking from practical perspective. There is one kind of thought I have, is that, okay, but if you just need, simple sign up page where you are, just passing email and password, is Keycloak still a valid solution? Isn't it a gun for a cannon for a fly kind of?
I think so. Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
If you have like a simple web app, then I don't think it's like needed. If you have a microservice infrastructure, or rather ecosystem, then yeah, probably I would go with
yeah distributed things.
Yeah, exactly. And for us, it was so the way the project, or rather, I guess the whole platform evolved is that. So first of all, there were multiple programming languages, so you had to be language agnostic. Therefore, standards are important. So OpenID Connect again, and it also had a fine-grained control over what scopes and roles you allow on certain applications for different users. And you can do that again with the OpenID standard and its associated flows. So it was something like, say, some user from a certain department had the rights to perform certain queries on a database or things like that. And for that, you needed scopes. And yeah, it really helped because it was more about configuring it than implementing something. So as far as time to actually delivering something of business value is much more small than if you need to start writing your implementation. And again, especially maybe, I don't know, for like production projects on what the mentality is, for example, but for research projects, you try to have the experiments running as fast as possible to validate an idea, because there's no point in spending 6 months of developing a security solution if the actual, let's say, algorithm is worthless, So you want to get fast turnaround into observing what the behavior of the algorithm is, rather than focusing on, I guess, identity. And in a way, if you think about it, I think, so there are, in time, right, like all things are not necessarily automated, but are kind of like provided for you, like like how cloud did with infrastructure, how security is handled, or things like that, which, yeah, I think the idea is to unburden your team or yourself from having to write these things, but just focus on like what you have, like the added value that you want to have, I guess, with your project.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, well, there is one remaining thing that I guess is, again, an upside of Keycloak, but I just want to be sure that you have same opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have all of these GDPR kind of dramas currently, and people do not know how to deal with GDPR in their solutions, right? And actually, user accounts is the sweet spot of it, right? So place where you can identify the person who is using your system. So I guess Keycloak is complying to the GDPR requirements and all that stuff. So
yeah. I mean, so again, I'm not entirely sure about the entire requirements in terms of GDPR stuff, but you get like audit logs, for example. So it has like events that it triggers when somebody logs in, or somebody registers, or somebody changes their password, or things like that. I mean, you don't have the information, of course, but it does have events. And also, again, I think, but I think this is like application specific, because for us, it wasn't that we had users that we didn't know about. We actually had users that we wanted to onboard in terms of research scientists and things like that. Whereas GDPR was more related to the actual data that we worked on, not necessarily the user accounts. So maybe in that sense, I mean, not sure exactly how, or rather,
well, there is
approach it.
There is, for instance, right to be forgotten, right? So that you can on your own opt out from the service, and then you have. So I guess Keycloak has to have some features in that regard, or at least allow you to.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it doesn't, I'm not aware of any, but if it doesn't, then I think that you can augment it, because it has like a REST API. Like, so you could have a service that says, okay, delete this account or whatever, hide this information, or I don't know, things like that.
And in regards to cloud, because it's just a piece of software, so you can install it wherever you like. You can install it on a dedicated server in a cloud, or and all that stuff. But in the cloud, you also have identity providers, managers, like for instance, in AWS you have Cognito. But I guess the difference is in the fact that you can install the Keycloak on your premises, right? So that you can integrate it with your, I don't know, Active Directory thing, or any kind of sweet juice that you have in your enterprise. And it's closed, right? It's not connected to the cloud in an easy way. So I guess this is the reason why Keycloak is not actually comparable to AWS or to any other cloud solutions in that sphere, because it's not for that reason. It's for the purpose of kind of the advantage is that on-premises solution can integrate easily with Keycloak, and it's not so easy with cloud.
Yeah, in our example, we were using, so I don't know if you heard of OpenShift.
Just
it's like
it's
so it's pretty much like a open source project for like private clouds and things like that. So when a company wants to log something in, and then I think, I'm not sure that, but I think if you get like a paid subscription to Keycloak, or maybe you pay them some money to some theme, I'm not sure exactly. They even have like a direct integration with OpenShift, because I think it's done by Red Hat, so it's like the same company, and they do OpenShift, they do Keycloak, so they have some stuff that it's like plug and play. Or I think now they can even deploy them as containers, because I think OpenShift migrated to Kubernetes as an engine for running it.
I get it. Okay. And what are the other direct competitors? You mentioned, I think, in the beginning, right? It was
yeah, I think it's Auth0. With Auth0, I don't have so much experience, but from what I read online, it's like an awesome solution. But they do have like a pricing models, and I think it's in terms of number of users, so it could work. Honestly, when we started, I found out about Auth0 much later along the project, so at that point, it's like, whatever, it works, it's fine. I didn't even look at it. I did some, like, I played around at home a little bit with it, and it's pretty nice. And I think that when I tried, it was a couple of years ago, actually, Auth0 integrated much more easily with the Play framework from Scala. Because for Keycloak, for example, so they do provide you, so you have to write your own custom logic, and probably they have adapters now to make it more easily, but so I think it was more in terms about how the threading model is in the framework. But that was in the beginning of the framework of Keycloak and how you do integration with other technologies. I think in time they matured a little bit. With Auth0, it was like super easy to do with Play at that time. But yeah, things progress like with any other technology, and I'm sure that easy integration with other frameworks and things like that are a priority for somebody that wants to get adopted, I guess, in as much projects as possible.
Yeah, I guess now all of these things are already settled for Keycloak as well, so it's not really a drama anymore.
Yeah, probably.
So basically, there is a direct competitor to Keycloak. However, its bidding pricing model for bigger players means that they have to pay quite some money for it, and therefore companies might go into Keycloak because it's not having the same model. Right?
Yeah, I think so. And there might be other competitors that I don't know of, but yeah. In our case, I think Keycloak really helped us. So I'm very happy with it.
Do you think that there is something missing in this piece of software that you might find in the future in other solutions, and this would convince you to switch, or it's a complete solution that probably will stay for years on the market, because what else you can do with authorization notification, right?
Well, I think it's mostly about how a web identity will evolve. Mm-hmm. At this point, I don't think so. At this point, I think Auth0 and Keycloak as well are complete solutions in that sense. Mm-hmm. I don't know how identity will evolve, because it's clearly, so I guess time will tell, but it's basically like a sort of a tension between you having to remember end passwords on all the websites that you're creating accounts to versus giving all your data to like Facebook, right? So I don't know, maybe in time, like identity will evolve, or rather how we understand online presence for a certain person, right? Will probably evolve, and maybe other standards will come up, and who knows, maybe Keycloak will have to adapt, or other solutions would be used instead of it.
Okay. Well, to me, when I look from the perspective of this conversation, it looks to me that, for bigger players, for bigger companies, they probably already have some identity providers, right? So, but they might have something written by themselves, and now they have to, deal with new integrations with other providers, and suddenly they realize, okay, I have to write something from scratch again. Mm-hmm. Then they consider Keycloak. That's one case, I guess, because another case is when you know already that you will have to integrate with a lot of identity providers, and you are just starting.
Yeah.
And you just want to have things like you mentioned in the research moment. You don't want to write for weeks or even months this piece of software, but you just want to validate your basic assumptions in the software. And and make users in your make it available in your system, and don't think about how it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I think from what you said, it looks like Keycloak will stay for longer, right? It's not like a short-term fashion. It looks like the software will become really a piece of a lot of systems, which already is. So
yeah, I think so.
Unless Auth0 changes its pricing model, because they might.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know how much you have to pay for it. Maybe they're really cheap, and for companies that have money, they don't really care. I don't know.
Yeah,
The thing is that Auth0 gives you managed solution.
Yeah.
While Keycloak, you have to manage yourself.
Exactly.
So it's like, I don't know. It's a trade-off, I guess, with how much money you want to, or rather, if you have the infrastructure in your company, and I guess a person that's willing to do the actual maintenance of the server and things like that, which in our case we had, versus you're starting on your own and you have no idea how things will go, you probably go with Auth0 because then you don't have to manage anything. So,
yeah, I would say that if I were, just starting a new software venture, I would probably start with Auth0 because there is not many users coming in, and probably it won't gonna harm me much, or even with AWS Cognito, because why not? Although
yeah,
I was dealing with AWS Cognito, and it is not really fun to configure it. It's not real fun. So at least my DevOps guys were trying to do a lot of things at Scala, and they trying to do a lot of automation on AWS to have everything in the proper way, set up using all the tools on the AWS, and Cognito forever and all that stuff. And it was not rocket science thing. It was really simple stuff like CI/CD pipeline with basic authorization, authentication, and all this set up from scripts automatically, right? And it was a drama. So, so it's not that they are not experienced. It's just that there are, these tiny blocks in AWS are not always in a perfect way shaped together. So this flexibility in between them is limited in certain cases.
Okay.
So yeah, it worked, but we spent quite some time in learning how to do it right. So probably if I were, just thinking about, okay, let's create an account somewhere and have this done, then I wouldn't go into AWS Cognito thing because it's a lot of configuration crap. I would just go to such thing like Auth0 because they are just for that. But later when things go great and I have a lot of users, then probably I would have this kind of decision moment where I would either go to some custom stuff or AWS Cognito or
and hopefully you get to that point, right?
Yeah, of course. That's the happy path, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I don't want to spend weeks or months on dealing with users. I just want to get them to the right value proposition. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Radu, I think we exhausted the whole topic. It was really joyful call for me. I learned a lot from you, so it was really valuable. Thank you very much for this, and stay healthy.
Yeah, you too.
Other time.